Hi, everyone! The life of every creature on the planet is a set of completely random events. Some are always lucky, while others can't catch a break. Unfortunately, this is how life works. Though there are some exceptions, all the heroes of our video today are animals. Big and small, domestic and wild, dangerous and not. All of them share a sad story, and it might seem that they were not destined to survive, but people decided to intervene. Some of them wanted to help. And turn the most miserable animal in the world into the happiest and most grateful.
Slowly, slowly. Oh, wow.
Today, we tell you amazing stories of animal rescue that will melt your heart. Let's get it on. Boon Rod. Do not be confused by the terrified look of this good boy. What you see is perhaps the bravest dog on the planet. It's hard to stay calm when there are so many strangers around you, and you just suffered from perhaps the biggest shock of your life. This story happened a year ago. When one of the employees of the oil rig went outside to take a break and look at the calming waves, the last thing he expected to see was a dog. An unfortunate, exhausted animal was clinging on the metal beams to escape from the waves. It was difficult for the employee to believe his own eyes. After all, the oil rig was located 220 kilometers off the coast of Thailand, and yet the dog was real. Without thinking twice, the workers joined forces to lift the animal up. The dog was completely wet, exhausted, and as soon as people offered her food, it immediately fell on it. So it became clear that the dog had a very hard time. At the first opportunity, the animal was put on an oil tanker and returned to land. It's hard to explain how the dog ended up so far from the coast. It must have been carried away by the undercurrent, and then it had no other choice but to keep swimming. The rig workers named the dog Boon Rod, a Thai word that roughly translates as the survivor. The dog no longer has to worry about anything. One of the rescuers said he wanted to adopt it. Asha. The next hero of our video for today is a tigress named Asha. When she was discovered by animal rights activists, it was impossible to look at her without tears. The 9-month-old Bengal tiger was the size of a 3-month-old cub. Its entire body was covered with wounds and bald spots. Asha was infected with parasites, and she also shared a cage with another, larger tiger, who often bit the baby. Asha belonged to a traveling circus, and of course, the activists simply could not abandon Asha to her fate. First, the tigress was taken to the vet, who prescribed all kinds of medication, and then the Wildlife Rescue and Educational Center provided Asha with a separate, spacious cage. After 8 weeks, the fuzz started to grow back on the bald spots. Full recovery took much more time. Today, Asha is a healthy, happy tigress. She even has a friend of her kin. Only the size reminds of her sad experiences in childhood. Asha is 2 to 3 times smaller than any other tiger of her age. Killer whale. For better or worse, we don't know the name of this killer whale because what you see is a wild animal that got into trouble. This black and white beauty got stuck between the rocks at low tide. A little later, when the water level dropped and the stones were exposed, the animal's life was in danger. This heartbreaking story happened in July 2015 on the shores of British Columbia. People found the killer whale by pure accident. The news about the animal in danger spread quickly, and although very soon a whole crowd of locals gathered on the shore, it was not so easy to help the terrified animal. Nobody had the equipment capable of lifting a 3-ton beast. People had no choice but to wait and try to ease the suffering of the whale as much as they could. At first, the crowd of onlookers was dispersed so that the animal did not get nervous. Then the volunteers covered the body of the killer whale with damp rags and began to pour water on it. Witnesses say that when the whale felt the moisture on its body, it let out a groan of relief. It was impossible to mistake it for something else. This went on for 8 hours. All this time, people worked tirelessly, and in the end, their hard work paid off. The water level had risen again. The sight of a healthy, happy killer whale heading back to the sea
Oh my God.
has become a worthy reward for those people. Leopard. This animal might not look particularly grateful, but that's only because it probably hasn't even realized what happened yet. It's hard to say how exactly the predator ended up at the bottom of a 6-meter hole filled with cold water, but one thing was clear: the animal was trapped there. The hole was too deep for the big cat to simply jump out of. The steep walls left no chance of climbing up. The predator was only lucky in one regard: it was born a leopard. They are quite good swimmers by nature, and although the animal kept floating, it was gradually losing strength and could not last much longer. Luckily, people came to the rescue. As it usually happens, the predator was found by pure accident. People called the Wild Animals Rescue Team, which arrived to help. However, they couldn't rescue the leopard right away. First, a log was lowered into the water. The rescuers were hoping that the leopard would climb on it so that they could lift it, but unfortunately, the structure was too unstable. In the end, people decided to lower the cage down, and it worked. They didn't have to ask the leopard twice. It jumped in at once, more than ready to get away from the water. In a couple of hours, the animal was released back into the wild. Giselle. When experts discover an animal in trouble, they evaluate its condition and health on a 10-point scale. This horse called Giselle was given a solid one, which means it really was in grave danger. The animal was extremely malnourished. Its bones were so clearly visible under its mud-covered hide that you could count them. The horse was barely able to stand, and it was obvious that it struggled to take another step. More than that, the halter was on the horse's muzzle for so long and sat so tightly that it was partially embedded in its skin. The poor thing must not have been properly fed for months, and it's hard to even imagine what the horse had gone through before it was finally found by some caring people. It took some time to help the poor animal. Giselle's condition was so bad that experts were afraid to give her food. The digestive system could simply fail. The animal weighed a measly 306 kilograms, while a healthy horse of this size should weigh at least 500, if not more. Giselle's life hung by a thread, and yet this story has a happy ending. Water, delicious food, medical care, and safe shelter did wonders. Giselle demonstrated an incredible will to live, and so, after a couple of months, you could hardly recognize her. No longer exhausted or unhappy, Giselle even revealed her character to the rescuers. Experts say that Giselle is very talkative and also likes to behave as if she is the best horse in the stable. Giraffe. Looking at this thick metal ring with sharp edges, it's hard to even imagine what harm it could do if put on an animal. It's even more frightening to realize that this is not just some random piece of metal found in a junkyard. This is a ring that animal rights activists removed from a live, wild giraffe. This seems like a difficult task, even for experts, and it really is. A giraffe is a large animal that weighs up to 800 kilograms. First, the rescuers had to catch it. The only way to safely remove the ring from the leg was to completely immobilize the animal, and this required the efforts of a team of more than 10 people. Some of them held the giraffe's neck. Others kept the legs still. One man, armed with a circular saw, tried to cut the iron as neatly and quickly as possible. And although the giraffe was very unhappy with everything that was happening, the procedure was a success. Moreover, people did it just in time, before the iron bit harder into the skin and caused serious, irreparable damage.
Bye.
Jackson. If we asked you who a man's best friend was, almost all of you would say a dog without hesitation.
Sit.
Yeah,
This is Max.
I'm the boss now.
Joyous barking, a wagging tail, a wet nose, and loyal eyes, this is enough to make one's heart melt. And it's hard to believe some people are cruel enough to hurt a dog. When Hayden Howard from Indiana first saw strange marks on her dog's body, she wasn't particularly worried. The dog, an English Mastiff called Jackson, spent most of his time outside. The marks could be insect bites, but over time, there were more and more of them. The thick fur made it difficult to take a good look at the wounds. Jackson acted as if nothing was wrong, and yet the woman eventually decided to bring the pet to the vet. When the specialist shaved the dog and carefully examined his body, his eyes filled with tears. All this time, Jackson's body was riddled with a huge number of metal pellets. These marks were not left by insects, but by the weapon of some evil person. Wounds covered the dog's entire body. One was right next to Jackson's eye, so it was only by a miracle that he hadn't lost his sight. The vet removed 27 pellets from Jackson's skin. The specialists assumed there were probably twice that many projectiles fired at the dog. Even though it wasn't a real weapon, meaning there was no threat to its life, Jackson was in terrible pain. In the end, the police took over the case. Details are not disclosed, but most likely, the dog was tormented by Howard's neighbor. In any case, Jackson's suffering finally came to an end, and he gradually began to recover.